Displaying a physically shredded physique while suffering from chronic afternoon brain fog is the ultimate clinical confession of biological weakness. Modern fitness culture aggressively celebrates external aesthetics while completely ignoring a rotting gut microbiome, creating a massive population of fake performers who look incredibly elite on the outside, but operate with a severely castrated, low-status cognitive capacity. Billions of individuals dedicate thousands of hours to lifting heavy weights and strictly counting calories, genuinely believing they are optimizing their health and asserting dominance over their environment. Yet these exact same individuals cannot sustain deep, unfragmented focus for more than 20 minutes. They require massive doses of synthetic caffeine simply to function, and they experience severe emotional reactivity when faced with complex, high-stakes intellectual problems. This is not discipline. It is an engineered biological illusion. In the rigorous fields of clinical psychopharmacology and gastroenterology, prioritizing superficial muscle growth while systematically destroying the gut-brain axis is recognized as a direct path to early-stage neurodegeneration. Those who remain willfully blind to the unfiltered clinical breakdown exposed in the next few minutes are actively choosing to remain biologically weak. They will continue to exist as highly profitable, exhausted consumers, falsely believing their physical appearance somehow compensates for a brain that is actively decaying from the inside out. How does an inflamed gut destroy cognitive capacity? Understanding this profound biological weakness requires looking past the superficial skeletal muscle and examining the human body's highly complex secondary neural network, known scientifically as the enteric nervous system. This massive biological superhighway consists of over 500 million neurons embedded directly into the lining of the intestinal walls. It operates entirely independently of the conscious brain, yet it completely dictates the prefrontal cortex's operational capacity. This structure is intimately connected to the primary brain inside the skull through the vagus nerve, a massive biological cable that transmits millions of chemical and electrical signals every single second. When a supposed high performer consumes a strict diet filled with artificial sweeteners, synthetic protein isolates, and heavy chemical emulsifiers, they are actively and severely damaging this critical communication pathway. Modern gastroenterology proves definitively that the stomach dictates the baseline performance of the human brain. If the gut is chronically filled with inflammatory, artificial fuel meant to quickly build muscle mass, the enteric nervous system instantly detects a severe biological threat. Vagus nerve immediately transmits violent, chaotic distress signals directly upward to the central nervous system. The brain is forced to respond to this continuous gastrointestinal emergency by drastically slowing down executive function. It violently diverts finite metabolic energy away from high-level problem-solving, impulse control, and creative synthesis, forcing that critical energy downward into the digestive tract to manage the toxic biological disaster. This creates a severe evolutionary mismatch. The exhausted athlete attempts to execute complex professional tasks, but their biological hardware is entirely consumed by an internal inflammatory crisis. Elite cognitive performance requires a pristine, frictionless internal environment. When the gut is chronically inflamed, cardiovascular efficiency plummets, and the brain is starved of clean, highly oxygenated blood. Fake performer falsely assumes they are simply tired from training, completely unaware that their neurological hardware is physically suffocating due to the toxic, supposedly clean fuel they blindly ingest to maintain their physical appearance. The fitness diet forces the nervous system into a perpetual state of biological panic, making top-tier intellectual dominance physiologically impossible. What is the biological link between brain fog and weakness? Physical strength is heavily romanticized by modern society as the ultimate indicator of power. In strict clinical reality, carrying massive amounts of muscle while suffering from chronic brain fog is the undeniable physical manifestation of a weak, failing organism. To understand this terrifying pathology, one must examine the structural integrity of the intestinal lining. A biologically optimized gut lining acts as an elite, highly selective security barrier, composed of tightly packed cells held together by delicate protein structures known as tight junctions. However, the continuous daily consumption of modern fitness supplements actively destroys this vital defense mechanism. Artificial emulsifiers and highly processed thickeners found in common diet foods aggressively burn through the protective mucosal layer. They create microscopic perforations in the intestinal wall, triggering a highly dangerous clinical condition known as intestinal permeability or leaky gut syndrome. When this delicate barrier shatters, a catastrophic biological event occurs inside the fake performer. Toxic metabolic waste, undigested synthetic proteins, and harmful bacterial endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides, leak directly out of the stomach and flood the central bloodstream. The immune system instantly recognizes these floating particles as deadly foreign invaders and launches a massive, violent systemic inflammatory response to neutralize the threat. These aggressive neurotoxins travel straight upward through the cardiovascular system, forcefully crossing the highly sensitive blood-brain barrier. Once inside the skull, these toxins trigger the brain's internal immune cells, known as microglia. The activated microglia rapidly release highly corrosive inflammatory cytokines, bathing the delicate neural networks of the prefrontal cortex in severe oxidative stress. The neurons literally lose their ability to fire quickly and accurately. This is the exact, undeniable biological mechanism of brain fog. It is not a lack of sleep. It is the physical sensation of the brain swelling and suffocating under the heavy weight of toxic metabolic waste leaking from a rotting stomach. Operating daily with this level of severe acute neuroinflammation permanently lowers the overall cognitive ceiling. The individual looks powerful on the outside, but internally, their central nervous system is crumbling under chemical stress, rendering them entirely incapable of competing against a truly optimized, biologically superior human. Why do fake performers suffer from a low dopamine baseline? The field of psychopharmacology tightly guards the terrifying reality of how the gut directly controls human motivation and status. Dopamine is the universal neurochemical currency of extreme ambition, aggressive drive, and high-tier execution. The mainstream fitness narrative constantly suggests that discipline is solely a matter of willpower generated inside the mind. This is biologically false. The vast majority of the body's serotonin, and a massive percentage of the critical precursor amino acids required to synthesize dopamine, such as L-tyrosine, are manufactured exclusively by the beneficial bacterial colonies living inside the gut microbiome. When a fitness enthusiast engages in a highly processed artificial diet to maintain their physique, they are actively burning down the exact biological factory responsible for generating their own motivation. As toxic metabolic waste floods the system and eradicates these essential bacteria, the raw materials needed for neurochemical synthesis vanish. The brain simply cannot produce dopamine. Furthermore, the remaining dopamine receptors in the prefrontal cortex aggressively downregulate to protect themselves from the severe neuroinflammation caused by the leaky gut. They become completely blunted, scarred, and highly insensitive. This creates a terrifying clinical outcome. The physically strong individual entirely loses the primal evolutionary drive to conquer their intellectual environment. They wake up feeling emotionally numb, devoid of the aggressive cognitive ambition required to succeed in a highly competitive hierarchy. This is the exact moment the engineered fitness matrix claims total victory over the human mind. The fake performer is now biologically trapped. Because their internal endogenous dopamine production has completely collapsed, they desperately seek cheap, artificial spikes of external pleasure just to feel a fleeting sense of being alive. They rely heavily on synthetic pre-workout stimulants, endlessly scroll digital dopamine feeds, and consume pacifying entertainment. Their biological baseline of motivation has rotted away entirely, replacing the high-tier drive of an apex predator with the weak, easily manipulated neurochemistry of a perpetual victim. They have successfully built a physical armor to hide a severely castrated biological potential. How does a rotting microbiome cause early neurodegeneration? The consequences of this profound biological weakness extend far beyond daily fatigue. Prioritizing aesthetics over the gut-brain axis is a direct catalyst for early-stage neurodegenerative disease. The human brain is meticulously designed to operate in a pristine, low-inflammation environment. When the blood-brain barrier is continuously breached by the toxic metabolic waste leaking from a compromised intestinal tract, the central nervous system is subjected to unrelenting oxidative damage. The continuous flood of inflammatory cytokines forces the brain into a state of chronic defense. It stops prioritizing memory consolidation, rapid learning, and neuroplasticity. Instead, the biological machine devotes all available energy simply to surviving the localized chemical fire occurring inside the skull. This chronic neuroinflammation severely disrupts the glymphatic system, which is the brain's highly advanced waste clearance mechanism that operates during deep delta wave sleep. Because the fake performer's microbiome is severely compromised, their body cannot properly regulate core temperature or synthesize the necessary precursors for melatonin. They lose the ability to enter and sustain the deep stages of sleep required for neurological repair. As a direct result, highly toxic beta-amyloid proteins begin to aggressively accumulate in the neural pathways. These are the exact same destructive proteins linked to severe cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. The individual falsely assumes their brain fog is a temporary inconvenience that can be solved with another cup of artificial caffeine. In reality, they are actively allowing permanent structural damage to occur within their neuroarchitecture. They are sacrificing decades of high-level cognitive output simply to maintain an artificially low body fat percentage using toxic, heavily processed dietary strategies. The mainstream medical industry profits immensely from this widespread biological ignorance, treating the inevitable symptoms of cognitive decay with highly lucrative synthetic pharmaceuticals while entirely ignoring the rotting foundation in the gastrointestinal tract. What is the exact protocol to restore elite neurochemistry? The window of opportunity to escape this massive biological trap and reverse this severe cognitive decay is actively closing right now. Every single heavily processed meal consumed under the standard modern fitness protocol accelerates the permanent death of critical neural pathways. Ignoring the clinical reality of the gut-brain axis is a direct, conscious choice to accept irreversible neurodegeneration and a life of low-status intellectual mediocrity. Elite performers and top-tier biohackers are monopolizing the exact longevity protocols required to restore this neuroarchitecture today, elevating their cognitive status far beyond the exhausted, physically obsessed masses. Reclaiming absolute biological dominance requires the total, violent destruction of the fake fitness illusion. Healing the shattered gut-brain axis requires executing a strict, uncompromising clinical protocol before the damage to the blood-brain barrier becomes entirely permanent. This protocol begins with the aggressive, absolute elimination of all artificial sweeteners, synthetic protein isolates, chemical emulsifiers, and refined industrial sugars. There is absolutely no room for moderation when dealing with proven neurotoxins that perforate the intestinal wall. The biological machine must then be forced into a deep, sustained state of cellular autophagy through strict clinical fasting. Autophagy is the body's highly advanced internal macro-waste clearance mechanism. When the digestive system is finally given a prolonged period of absolute silence, the body actively hunts down and destroys the toxic metabolic waste floating in the bloodstream. This critical fasting window allows the intestinal lining the necessary time to physically heal, regenerate the protective mucosal layer, and permanently seal its microscopic perforations, completely stopping the leakage of deadly endotoxins into the brain. Furthermore, the completely decimated microbiome must be aggressively repopulated. This requires the strategic, daily introduction of highly bioavailable prebiotics and clinical-grade, multi-strain probiotics to rapidly re-establish the beneficial bacterial colonies that synthesize dopamine and serotonin. The nervous system must be heavily supported with massive doses of high-quality, omega-3 fatty acids to immediately reduce the acute neuroinflammation suffocating the prefrontal cortex. Output must be strictly monitored, prioritizing deep, unfragmented delta-wave sleep in a pitch-black environment to allow the lymphatic system to aggressively flush the accumulated beta-amyloid proteins entirely out of the skull. Healing the gut is not a casual diet change. It is a mandatory, non-negotiable biological recalibration for anyone serious about unlocking genuine elite cognitive performance and escaping the category of a fake, weak performer. Understanding this classified clinical reality provides a massive evolutionary advantage, but simply knowing the truth is entirely useless without aggressive, uncompromising daily execution. The mainstream fitness and medical industries rely entirely on keeping the public biologically weak, perpetually exhausted, and highly profitable. Specific microprotocols required to cleanse the microbiome, rebuild the intestinal wall, and restore dopamine synthesis are actively suppressed by the algorithm, because a genuinely optimized, highly intelligent human deeply threatens the attention economy. The window to access these daily tactical commands and reverse the structural brain damage is shrinking fast. The cost of inaction is permanent neurodegeneration and a total, irreversible collapse of cognitive ambition. Subscribe to this channel right now to secure the biological baseline and permanently reject this engineered cellular decay. Then go directly to the links in the description to access the exact step-by-step clinical protocols required to heal the gut today. Do not wait for the fitness matrix to completely rot your nervous system. Take absolute control.